Hi, so this is a super quick review on scaffolding for student mastery. This is kind of how I set up my activities and my playlists and really my units during my English classes during normal school teaching. But this is the virtual teaching edition for our crazy spring semester of 2020. So, quick refresher, we probably haven't thought about this since college. This is the Bloom's taxonomy. We start at the remembering stage and ultimately we want our students to be able to create or produce new original work based on the knowledge that they've gained from our unit or from our lesson. We're going to be kind of walking through this slideshow following the Bloom structure. So, reminding you now what Bloom's taxonomy is, and ultimately having you guys create new and original virtual lessons for your students that scaffold for student mastery. Why is scaffolding important? Well, students feel supported because they're able to fully understand one step of knowledge at a time and be confident in their ability to continue to learn new pieces of your lesson. They take an increasingly active role, which is super important in this time when we're not in front of them directly teaching them. And they really are able to own their deep understanding of the learning, which again is really important when they're basically teaching themselves right now. You probably already do this for your students, so we're just going to try to provide you with some other ideas about ways that you can ensure all of your students are mastering your content area. We also know that one size doesn't fit all, whether you're an elementary school teacher or a high school teacher. You might be using playlists or badging or student voice and choice. Really be creative and flexible. This is kind of up to you guys to best fit your students. Quickly, think about one time where you did scaffold in your lesson. What was the outcome? How might that compare to a typical lesson that you might do without necessarily intentionally scaffolding? Keep those differences in your mind as we continue to explore some of these opportunities you have to scaffold. All right, in my class, I'm going to X out of this really quickly. I teach 9th and 10th grade English, so we're going to use poetry and narrative writing. I do two different ways of scaffolding. This is my playlist unit. So in my poetry unit, playlist unit, the students were working through this at their own pace. I would provide 3 or 4 assignments to do per class, and they got to choose the order that they worked on these. But each of the playlists is set up in Bloom's taxonomy. So we remember these poetic concepts, metaphor, allusion, etc. They apply, analyze, and evaluate different texts. So the next 3 steps of Bloom's taxonomy, looking at different poems, looking at different genres, etc. Finally, they're creating their own poetry collection using the knowledge they've gained from this poetry unit. If you take a deeper dive into these individual assignments, they're also scaffolded for Bloom's taxonomy. So, for example, our metaphor playlist, recall a definition of metaphor, find an example of a metaphor, look at these examples of songs and sonnets and identify the metaphors. Ultimately, they're creating their own metaphor using an app called Canva, and they posted or shared that image, some sort of creative thing that they could post to Instagram, for example, about their metaphor, and that's the last step. If you keep going, you can see in the applying, analyzing, evaluating stage when we watched the movie Dead Poet Society, they applied their knowledge of poetic concepts to the poems referenced by the characters in the video. We use the typecast strategy here. And again, so they're using that applying and analyzing stage through the playlist. Finally, we have their poetry collection, which is where they get a little bit of guidance, but have a lot of free reign to use the knowledge learned in this scaffolded unit to create their own 10 poems, images, and also highlight the poetic elements in each poem. So they're applying all of the knowledge that they learned through this scaffolded structure. And again, these are all playlists because I wanted my students to be able to practice self-pacing. In the next video, I'll talk about the grid method and how the Teach Better team has used that to scaffold for student mastery.